I'm Jeff Abbas. Thanks for joining me this morning for Roots in Americana Music on member-supported KBVL, .1 Postville, community radio for the four-county area.
As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me
how this individual had gotten hurt. They cuffed him, they put him on the cot, they put him in. 2 ICE agents jumped in the back with me. When I put the oxygen on...
By Alan, you know, I got to go down there 2 years before the raid. And
so why don't we start from...
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Can you move over a little bit?
This way?
Yeah.
How's this?
Right.
Thank you. Okay.
yeah, just be comfortable.
Okay.
But let's start, you know, by identifying yourself.
Okay.
And then, what is your connection? When did it start your connection with Postville?
Okay. Vic Rosenthal. I'm the executive director of Jewish Community Action, which I've been the director now for almost 9 years. And Jewish Community Action is an organization that brings together people from the Jewish community to build coalitions and take action to solve problems in the community and advance social, racial, and economic justice. And we work on a variety of campaigns, from immigrant rights to foreclosures to racial justice to trying to create equity in the community between all peoples. We have been working on issues regarding immigration and immigrant rights now since 1999. We got involved working with some Latino churches back in the late 90s who were trying to get driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, because Minnesota used to allow that and they changed the law in '98. And so we were working on a campaign with some churches to change the law back. And I think we were making some progress until September 11th, 2001, when all of a sudden immigrants became enemies of the state, security threats, and let's just say all of our efforts to work with the immigrant community really kind of went up in a ball of fire in a lot of ways. But we continue to work on a variety of ways on immigrant rights, continuing trying to make people understand that immigrants are part of the fabric of America. I'm an immigrant child. My grandparents were born in Russia, came over because of pogroms that went after Jewish people in Russia back in around the 1901, 1902. So, I'm just as likely to have been abused or taken advantage of by people who didn't want to see Jewish people come to America as people who are come to America today. So we have been connected to this issue, and what happened was in 2006, Rabbi Morris Allen had been interested in trying to figure out ways to expand the production and the supply of kosher meats in the Twin Cities. That's very important for some members of the Jewish community to eat kosher meat. And he had made a trip down to agri-processors in Postville and was interested in working with them. And then sometime in the spring of 2006, there was this article written in The Forward, which is this big Jewish magazine in New York City, stating all kinds of problems at this plant. And his feeling was that if we're going to try to get more meat to come in from this plant, we're not going to want members of our community to be using meat that might have come from a plant where workers would have been abused and taken advantage of. So he helped to organize a kind of a fact-finding mission to Postville, and I was one of the people who was one of 5 people from around the country that got to go to Postville. And over the course of 2 days in August of 2006, the 5 of us did a tour of the plant, spent 3 hours visiting with the management of the plant, and then we spent many more hours than that visiting with church leaders, union leaders, and a whole bunch of former workers of the plant. Former workers, yes. I don't think, well, we may have met with some current workers too. In most cases, it was anonymous. We asked specifically, we didn't want names because we didn't want anybody's confidentiality to be violated, and because we were nervous that there might be retaliation which, as it turned out, is what happened. But the workers were very forthcoming and very honest about what was going on. And unfortunately, much of what they said corroborated what the Forward had said. Workers who were not paid the wages they deserved, worked overtime, didn't get the wages, accidents that were happening because virtually no training was taking place, no health benefits, training done in English when the primary language was Spanish, child labor, you name it. If you ever read the Jungle that was written by Upton Sinclair 100 years ago, you could have been rereading it, unfortunately. And given that the plan was being run by a Jewish family, as Jews, we were particularly horrified. I think all of us are particularly horrified when people in our name do things that are so abhorrent to what we believe in as a people and as a culture. And so we spent several more visits. We actually went back one more time. They came to visit us one more time. Our effort was to try to see if we could change how they operated, try to make them understand that they could do better, that their plant would work better, and they weren't interested. We were not compelling enough to them. And so we left. And it was at that point that Rabbi Allen began this journey that has created this new initiative called Heksher Tzedek. And while he has done that, and we've done that with him, we've continued down the path of that we've been on now for 10 years of trying to, fully reform our broken immigration system.
You said they weren't interested, and that's a big question that I've always had. If it was better for the plant, and not even taking into account the moral and ethical,
right?
Why weren't they interested?
Well, I think they weren't interested for a variety of reasons. One was the messengers. We were the wrong messengers. Even though we're Jewish, they're from a different part of the Jewish community. They're Orthodox. We're conservative Jews, and they believe they have the true analysis of what Judaism means. We don't, and therefore, why would they listen to us? Maybe they would listen to Orthodox Jews, but not to conservative Jews. That's one reason. The second reason is that some of the suggestions we made might have cost them some money. And in the end, profits were extremely important to them. And so why would you do things that would reduce your profits, even though it might have made your plant more successful?
Somebody said to us, they knew that this would end, that this couldn't last forever. And the analogy that he uses is like you go on a road that has 60 mile an hour posted, but you go 90 miles an hour, you get there faster most of the time. Once in a while you'll get caught and you'll get a ticket.
Right.
You think they knew that this would end?
I don't think they knew that it was going to end. I think that they had a good thing going and they were determined to stick with it. I actually don't think they believed it was going to end. I think they were optimistic that they could do this for a long time. People like that, who pray all the time and who are in such close relationship to some extent, certainly from their analysis with God, believe that they were doing righteous work and were not about to be dissuaded by that just because some other Jewish people or the government said otherwise. Now, this is a plant, remember, who had been fined multiple times by the Department of Labor in Iowa for multiple violations, accidents, not providing, the right kind of, for example, you're supposed to have eye cleaning, eye washers at different points along the line because this is very difficult and dangerous work. They didn't do that. Now that's not a very expensive thing to have to do. They just didn't. You know, there was some degree of, I often think one of the words that I use to describe what I think they did was just arrogance. You know, where we listen to a higher law. So, you know, and they were fined on multiple occasions. The largest fine in the state of Iowa's history for environmental violations was against agriprocessors for the way they were dumping salt into the water of Postville.
And did they pay for it?
Yeah, that fine I think was in the neighborhood of $600,000 to $700,000. Yeah, they paid that fine. But I think, you know, they treated fines like it was part of a business cost. You know, the way you and I, if we ran a business and you had to buy new camera supplies or film, you know, that's part of your business. To them, part of the business was, well, we'll, you know, violate a few things here or there. Department of Labor will assess some fines. We'll pay the fines. But if it means, you know, being able to cut corners to make a little bit more money, that's what we'll do.
You know, one thing we haven't been able to do is go into the plant. So, because you were in the plant, can you tell us about your tour?
Well, I had never been in a meatpacking plant before, and you know, I'm not a vegetarian, but I don't eat beef. I haven't eaten beef in a long time. It's not a pretty place. You know, people work very, very hard. You don't get this sense of sort of camaraderie because they're working so hard, and there's such a focus on getting things done by a certain time. You know, the line has to keep moving. You know, you got to produce. I didn't go on the kill floor because I just didn't think my stomach could handle it. But it was very clear being on the plant floor that this is work that should be paid well because it's very hard work and it's dirty work and it's work that Americans depend on. I mean, how many millions of Americans eat chicken and beef in this country? And if we want to get good chicken and good beef, we ought to be prepared to pay a good price for that, and we ought to believe that the people who work on these lines ought to be paid well. And so one of the things that I was realizing as I was on the lines watching these people work is realizing that how many of them were making $6.25 an hour, $6.50 an hour, $7 an hour, you know, below poverty wages, and they're doing work that puts food on my table. And it creates a sense of anger that this is just wrong. This is just not the way this should be.
So I remember seeing you on July the 27th, and there was a big contingency of a Jewish contingency from you. So can you tell us about how you went, how that was organized?
Sure.
What the meaning of it was?
Well, when we heard about the raid, you know, this, as you know, wasn't the first raid that's taken place by ICE. There had been a very large raid against Swift meatpacking plants in December of 2006. So we already knew that when raids of this type took place, they were horribly damaging to a community. So when this raid took place, and you know, we had already been connected to some of the people at St. Bridget's Church from our visit back in 2006, we felt there had to be a role for us to play. And we immediately got on the phone with some of the people that we had already met, people like Sister Mary McCauley, Paul Real, Father Odekirk. These are all people we had met back in 2006.